Welcome to Cool Fucking Tech, where we discuss our takes on the latest tech.
We amplify the voices on the forefront of new solutions and explore the possibilities of creating a fair and equitable world.
Today we're going to talk about algorithmic bias, and there's a lot of really interesting ramifications of algorithmic bias, and it's really, kind of emerging study that's going on. So I was hoping to Tenda, because you're the computer guy in this group, can you just give us a really quick general primer on AI and what does algorithmic bias mean in kind of very technical terms?
I could try my best. Maybe we could talk about really like what bias is, and then talk about, then start talking about how that gets introduced in algorithms, right? So basically, a simple definition would be that biases are things that arise when particular labels and features confound decisions, right? Whether they be human or artificial. And the way to think about how a bias and a stereotype arise is that it's basically coming from something that we classify as being typical of a certain behavior. And once that clouds our decision making process, that's what would constitute what a bias would be, right? And so when we think about the distinction between human decisions and artificial intelligence or artificial based decisions, then we can start talking about how bias can get introduced in artificial intelligence, right? When we're building up these systems that are supposed to be tools that help us to achieve a certain objective, if we look at, say, for example, a simple example would be an image classifier, right? You train an algorithm to learn how to pick up a certain pattern in images to be able to detect something in that image. Say you're interested again in like pictures of cats, right? So you train this algorithm with a specific data set, and you basically train it to be able to identify pictures of cats, to tell whether or not a certain picture is a cat or not. But what could end up happening in your training of this algorithm is that you feed it with a data set that is not representative of the real world, right? So, you end up encoding a certain bias or misrepresentation within the algorithm, which forces it, or which basically makes it not be able to recognize I don't know, have you seen like these like hairless cats that people like, I don't even know what they're called.
Persian cats, my dude.
So imagine that you trained this algorithm without any pictures of Persian cats, right? Although Persian cats might be, 2% of the cat population out there, because you didn't train. What's that?
Catulation,
yeah, catulation, right? Because you didn't train that algorithm with a representative data set that allowed it to basically be able to pick out these Persian cats, it might see a picture of a Persian cat and decide that it's not a cat, right? So I'm oversimplifying this, but that's basically what would be something that you would classify as bias being introduced into an algorithm or into some sort of system or artificial intelligence.
I really love that you went that. For our listeners, we actually prepare our notes separately, and to tend to just hit on like so many things that I was going to hit on later on, and I'm just always amazed by how intelligent you are, Tatenda. I'm just like, wow, this guy. Which
you did this to me last time. Thank you, but you did this to me last time. Like, blew through all my talking points, and I was like, all right, so.
Hey, but me liking that what you say because I was gonna say it, that's confirmation bias already, right?
I know.
It's really interesting to think about AI as functional of data sets and how we inherently skew data sets. So realistically, let's take this from like two approaches, right? Which is, one is algorithmic bias usually shows up as false positives, right? Which is like, this is actually erroneous, but I marked it as a positive corollary. And a lot of that comes from having a bad data set for what you're trying to do, or having a data set that is assuming a corollary or finding a corollary that is based in biased institutions. So like some of the situations I saw to Tenda were like basically likelihood to get a higher degree. College admissions were like, oh, we want to find out what the likelihood was to get a higher degree. And they fed in all this data. And one of the pieces of data was zip codes. And zip codes were actually really feeding in, wealth, right? And there's obviously an unequal distribution of wealth by race in this country, right? So it was spitting out essentially, if you were African American, you were much less likely to get higher degrees. So that's like a false positive, right? Which is like, oh yeah, we found this corollary, but actually it's not connected whatsoever. And that's what I mean by that.
Right.
So I was thinking about what is like the best data sets. And do you have any hot takes on what you think is a way to get data that is free of biases?
That's a very hard problem to solve.
Yeah, well, you got 2 minutes.
So I think kind of like the way that we've approached the problem of algorithmic bias right now is we look at the results of a model or an algorithm that we've applied to a specific problem, and then realize that we trained it with the unrepresentative data set, and then we try to fix the data set after the fact. The reason why, the problem that you've pointed out is challenging is because it raises the question of what an unbiased or what a good data set is, right? So I think there isn't there's these things which they call like commercial grade data sets or golden data sets, which they typically train all these algorithms for different problems. And the problem with those golden data sets is that they're not really defined to solve all kind of they're not really defined to train all artificial intelligence algorithms to solve a variety of problems. So it's like one of those situations where I think one, you have to think about what the incentives are in creating the tool using artificial intelligence in as far as like solving the problem. And then two, you have to think about based on those incentives, like, are you willing to actually spend the time to create that data set which will result in an unbiased output? And then that also raises questions of what is the incentive structure for this project, right? Like, if it's money that's coming from big tech or the defense industry, then I doubt that they're gonna spend a lot of time in researching like what the data set looks like, as long as the algorithm either A, makes them more money based off that data, or leads to the more loss of life, right? Which is typically the output of defense products. Then is golden for them. So it's I didn't answer the problem, but it's a difficult question or a problem to solve.
I think like you were hyper specific, and I totally appreciate that, because essentially you're kind of saying that every data set is bad until you clean it for the question at hand. And realistically, so I have my MBA, I work product management, and a big part of that is questioning your biases and remaining objective to the data set, right? And one of the things is that if you think about data sets as observations, we all have that kind of observational bias, right? You could see everything, observe everything, be as cognizant as possible, but your unique process of going through life, you are given one data set, So it's really hard to kind of filter out your own thoughts and be like, to question your own biases. And, realistically, like an engineer is kind of curating the data set. So it's almost curating like life experiences in a way as well. So like, for instance, like one of the things that like kind of got us on this algorithmic bias topic was we were reading about one scientist that was basically just going back through and checking for racial discrimination in these algorithms. And it was kind of cool just to think about basically de-biasing algorithms, right?
Right.
And so, I think it's really interesting. Obviously, like on this podcast, we talk a lot about race. That's kind of like one of our go-tos. But we did start this podcast with the intention of really talking about diversity in general.
Right.
And we tried actually really hard to bring in people from like all forms of diversity and all kinds of people that get affected by biases. And it's really interesting to think about being algorithmic about de-biasing. I was wondering if you have some hot takes there.
Being algorithmic about de-biasing.
Like having a framework to question yourself.
Are you talking? So, in my research for the podcast, I was looking at there's basically a research field which is solely dedicating to detecting bias in artificial intelligence, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing which I thought was funny about it was that it uses artificial intelligence to detect.
We can't conquer the enemy. We have to make an even bigger enemy to fight the giants for us.
Oh God! So I mean, like, it's all very interesting. I guess, like, from a purely technical point of view, in which you can basically come up with algorithmic solutions to detecting bias in artificial intelligence, right? So there's things which they call adversarial learning, and then I think the other one is based on learning the latent structure of the data set which you use to train the artificial intelligence, right? So you basically apply a generative, neural net to the data set, and you try to figure out which other features should have more weight in the training of the neural net or in the training of the algorithm. And then you do that. You basically do a weighting of those inputs based on this new input. So it's very interesting, like the ways that we're trying to solve this problem. Like that's the algorithmic approach. But then there's also, I guess, like ways in which you can promote or try to be methodical about discovering bias, right? So say, for example, as far as algorithmic bias is concerned, like amongst the humans that are curating these algorithms, right, you need to make sure that for example, the results are reproducible. You need to make sure that there's transparency in the way that the data is collected and reported, and things of that nature, right? So that's sort of like I guess, like the methodical way of thinking about how to address the scientific way of kind of thinking about how to address bias in artificial intelligence and in algorithms. And then for ourselves, I think it's a really challenging problem, which I think doesn't have a straightforward answer. But for myself, I would say it's really important to definitely open your mind more to basically accepting different points of view based on different points of view that might challenge the way you see or your worldview, right? Because as you pointed out, right, once Mark and Tatenda have trained their minds to see the world a certain way, it's really hard to untrain that. And a part of it is like, are you willing to be challenged about certain assumptions that you've made based on your experiences? Right. So this can be, in any general situation, or even if you're tasked with finding biases that could have been introduced by your own perceptions. So that's kind of like, I guess, like two approaches that I would say might work from a methodical or scientific point of view of detecting and mitigating bias in algorithms, and sort of like on a more personal level.
Yeah, one of the cool things, I actually just had like a PM, how do we run agile teams today with the engineers at the startup I work at. And basically we were talking about like the fundamental part of agile teams is like there's a shared customer vision. And so I just did a deep dive on how do you build empathy for the customer. And a part of that is like, how do you do interviews? How do you segment your customers? How do you like understand what their wants are versus what you want to hear?
Yeah.
And so there's a series of questions you ask yourself, like especially in the startup world, right? Which is like, you don't want to lead the person to solution cases. You don't want to lead them to, thinking that your product is the best thing, which is really hard when you're passionate about the product and you just spent your whole, last 2 years, your paycheck building out this thing, right? So it's
right.
How did I frame it? How did I listen to that person? How did I ask the right questions so they aren't biased? If I did a group interview and they're sitting with their boss and their boss says something and they agree just because their boss is there, did I look for that? Did I check? Did I just accept all the answers that come in? Like, what questions did I ask myself to really, question my biases and their biases to get the truth, to get what is the actual problem, to get towards a solution?
Right.
And I think you're really apt to point out basically how there's a feedback between those, right? There's a set of assumptions that we make to make a quick choice, right? A Pareto.
Right.
And we build a model. Essentially, we're building models, right? AI is building models, right? And so
yeah,
we get one solution and then, okay, we look at that solution, we identify how it's biased, or we identify basically situations where it didn't capture everything. It didn't get the Persian cat, if you will, right? And then how did we now correct that model to adjust, and I think something that happens a lot in science, or at least, okay, so, obviously you're a computer engineer. You have a much different viewpoint than I do, right? But in chemical engineering, right, we have a system of equations that explains 80% of what's going to happen in the reactions. Now, in order for us to explain the last 20%, we have to introduce a whole nother system of equations. And then the last last 15%, and the next 5%, it's like impossible. You know what I'm saying? To really be accurate. So there's some trade-off too. And I was thinking about how interesting that trade-off is, and basically also how that system essentially, we're trying to recreate our learning ability, right? And it actually exacerbates or magnifies basically some of the same catch-ups that people make when they're learning, right? Some of the same failures that we have, rather than magnifying the good that we have, right? So towards this end, right, when we're talking about building teams that are unbiased, I was thinking about how diversity plays into the building of these teams, right? And how it plays into software development, or how it plays into product development, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was just wondering if you had any like situations in your career, I'm sure you've had, where you realized that like diversity actually played to the benefit of building a more robust product or more robust algorithm.
I can speak generally on the topic, or like what my my opinion on that is. I don't think I have like a specific example that I can call out without like, making something up. But the way that I would think about this is that the problem with algorithmic bias is that it's pretty much like going to manifest at all levels, as you pointed out, right? So there's different ways that we need to address the problem, right? Like, first of all, it's like, we've already talked a little bit about, thinking about what our data sets look like, right? The next level would be thinking about who the engineers that are actually developing these systems look like. You know what I mean? So there's I can give you an example of something along these lines. I was looking at the there is, let me look up the name of this organization. There's an organization called DARE, which is the Distributed AI Research Institute, right? And one of the projects that they worked on is called The Legacy of Spatial Apartheid, right? And the lead researcher on the program happened to be someone that grew up in a neighborhood which was negatively impacted by apartheid, right? So having her as a lead researcher, on such a program already means that she's bringing in, not only like a lived experience, but she's bringing in a wealth of knowledge that, the prototypical software developer, which is a white male dude, might not have. Right. And that's where diversity plays a key point, as far as who's writing the code. Right. Is what the data looks like, who's writing the code, and then finally, thinking about exactly how we interpret the results of the systems that we're building, which is another level that we need to basically critically analyze. So that's kind of like the way that I think about the importance of diversity at all the stages in building these systems.
Honestly, I was thinking about, you said like higher level, and I was thinking about it in the exact opposite sequence. Like the first thing that you do is build a team with, and this is something that we've said about the podcast, thought diversity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. There's complementary skill sets, and like I've always worked on very, very multidisciplinary teams, like throughout my whole career. Like when I was at defense tech, we had every type of engineer: electrical, mechanical, chemical, and like then we had like all the other groups like environmental, safety, yada yada yada. And it was like you had to leverage everyone else's skill set. There's no way you could know everything, right? You had to rely on people's expertise. And sometimes when we're trying to derive very human things, we have to rely on very human expertise, I think.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, maybe not like a personal thing, but yeah, I mean, I just meant like examples, right? And I was thinking about my own career, and there was a bunch of different things where it was reflective of the lack of diversity that the person was exposed to, I would say. So one time when me and you, we both worked in a diversity group in a big engineering firm, right? And they sent me off to SDSU to go do a talk to graduating engineers. Mm-hmm. They were senior electrical engineers that were doing their senior design project. It was a senior design project class.
Right.
And the professor expressly introduced us as having this talk because he's taught so many diverse candidates at SDSU and saw that the needle was barely moving in the corporate workforce. So, basically he just saw so many kids who were talented, graduated, at the top level of the pipeline for getting employed, and were not getting employed, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was hit with question after question that were like, there is no real better way of describing it as like at best racist, so like some of these questions were basically why are we talking about diversity when the best person should get hired? And it's like, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're literally talking about the best person getting hired. Right? Like we've said this in our podcast too. We said merit first, right? Merit first. Who is the best person for the job?
Right.
And the fact that it's seen as an attack,
right,
is in and of itself pretty representative of biases, right? And he said, also, I don't see how, this was another question. It's like, I don't see how that leads to better products. And the professor is getting actually kind of upset with, there's a couple of kids who are asking very similar questions and trying to twist it, and being repetitive, which is, obvious in and of itself.
Right. And
the professor chimed in. He's like, you know what? I worked at Toyota, and they were designing a minivan. And in the designs for the minivan, we had one woman that was in the room, right? And he was like, the design already almost made it to production. It was, they spent millions of dollars on the design or whatever, how much they spend on it. Mm-hmm. And they, showed it to her for just a rubber stamp type thing. And she looked at it in 1 second and was like, this absolutely will not fucking work. And they're like, why? And she's like, as a mom, I know all the time last minute things come up, and this thing's turn radius can't make a U-turn. Or it can't do like within a certain, like a 2-lane U-turn.
Right.
And she's like, you have to think about the customer segment. You have to think about the mother that is, frantic, that has to go back, that has to, figure it out. This is not ancillary. Like, it's just not like a corollary to who you're actually going to sell to.
Right.
And it's not that it couldn't make a U-turn. It was just like the specs for the U-turn was bad. She's like, look, honestly, if I was a mom, I would never prefer this because it can't fucking turn. Like, you guys built this economically, but didn't think about the end customer segment. And that was like a very strong, here's diversity, here's how that representative person of the customer segment is there. And it actually goes back to building empathy. Like having that mindset of where you could, I think empathy in a way is cheating life, right? It kind of lets you live 2 lives.
Right.
And if you like live those multiple lives, you have a wider data set to observe from. And it may be good or bad, but if you build it with enough different people, so where you have enough like broad range, you have a pretty broad understanding.
Right. I heard about this I guess it's what do you call this? Apparently they were building a resume screening tool at Amazon, right? And this tool ended up like being so atrocious. Like their intention was good, right? You can picture like all the dudes sitting around the coffee table or wherever like Amazon developers write their code, right? And they're like, all right, we're gonna help recruiting to sort this deluge of resumes that are coming into Amazon. And so what they did was they built this artificial intelligence based system, and the way that they built the system was that they looked at the data set that they looked at. First of all, was like, all right, what's the prototypical, I guess, like Amazon engineer or candidates that typically do well at our interviews, right?
Yeah.
Fed that into the algorithm, and what the algorithm ended up spitting out, or at least like the way that the algorithm ended up like sorting out these resumes, was that it basically was scoring resumes that said anything women or women organization based. It scored them lower.
I was reading about this same thing. It's just wild, right? It's a data set problem, right? It's like how they learned.
Right, but it's also like, it makes you think about same kind of thing, right? It makes you think about, of course, like this didn't see the light of day, but it makes you think about, what the process was and who was sitting in the room. Like, we don't know, who was sitting in the room at that specific point, but it really makes you think about it. Like, is there, enough diversity of thought? Is there enough, I guess, like checking of biases within the room, conscious and unconscious, when we develop these systems? Because at the end of the day, like, I feel like most of the times with some of these systems, we're basically creating a bunch of hammers. Right?
Yeah. Amen.
And we,
I know what you're going to say next, like.
We're creating a bunch of hammers, and we're thinking to ourselves, all right, I've got this amazing recruiting tool. Now let's solve the hiring problem. Bam. Now let's solve this problem, and so on and so on. But nobody actually really thinks about it anymore as to are we asking basic questions like, is artificial intelligence really the right tool or solution? Or, is artificial intelligence really the right tool that we need to solve this problem?
Amen, dude.
Number one.
Amen.
Are there alternative solutions that don't use artificial intelligence? Questions of that nature, right? Like, there really isn't anyone, or at least like, there might not be a lot of instances of people that are asking this question, right? So it's like the hammer comes first, and then we look for the nail.
For the nail, right? Yeah. Honestly, and that's It's so funny because like one of the big talks that I've been having, it's funny how things like kind of full circle, right? One of the big talks I've been having is like, are we questioning with the engineers that I work with right now is like, are we questioning first off if we need to build anything? Like, do we need to build anything? Are we reinventing the wheel? And like one of the things that was like really formative for me in my engineering career was, so I worked in defense and we would buy everything from McMaster Car. And McMaster Car was stupid expensive and we always had it shipped within a day or two, right? So literally just like hundreds of dollars. Like I remember, so what happened is I was designing this machine and it had a lot of weight that needed to sit on it. So I was just going to scaffold it on a table. And so I had the mechanical engineer start designing a proper scaffolding for this machine. It had to carry like basically a ton or something like that. And my boss chewed me out. He was just like, look, you could just buy the table. And I was all like, but you know, why would I buy a table? It's like a $600, $700 table. He's like, yeah, of course the table is like way cheaper.
Right.
I'm sorry, way more expensive than what it would to build it. You know, you could build it for $100, but you know the table is rated above what you need.
Right.
And you know that you're wasting engineering time developing something that is available.
Right.
You know, he's like, just use your time for the machinery only. Don't waste your time on the scaffolding.
Right.
You know? And it's kind of the same thing. These AI stuff, undoubtedly there will be a point where we need AI. Undoubtedly. But we're kind of putting garbage in, garbage out, right? Like there's so many bad data sets that are reinforced by histories, right? Mm-hmm. And histories that we're actually purposely trying to counter and make more equitable in the future. So it's kind of tautological to say I'm going to use this bad data set to make a better future based off what happened in the bad data set's time, right?
Right.
So like some examples are like zip code, right? Zip code is, we were talking about earlier, you know, indicative of wealth. Wealth is indicative of education level and race and yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's because of the history that America uniquely has, right? So like there are so many, and that's just like one thing. Education level then becomes, you know, insular, right? Education level, then it's career, then it's where you live again for your zip code and where you bring up your kids.
Right.
Right? So I was trying to think of like what things are not inherently racially biased that still could be used to solve human problems or still may be good corollaries to human problems. Right? And I really can't think of any. I mean, maybe you could, right? Because you're way smarter, but honestly, I just can't think of I really can't think of anything because I feel like we've touched every system with a status quo that is inherently something that we're trying to change, right? Like we didn't arrive here, me and you, to tend it. We weren't the first people to be born in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like,
what?
We were born in, we were born in like this pipeline of like all these other people and institutions and structures that we became a part of, right? So I was really trying to think about. I couldn't figure out anything, man. Like,
it's hard. It's
super hard. Yeah. Like,
you really, man, you just blew like the second half of my talking points out of the water yet again. Thank you very much. But it's scary to think about just the power of algorithmic bias to perpetuate existing structures of oppression, existing structures that limit people's ability to participate economically, existing structures that basically increase policing in certain neighborhoods that are more brown and black, and so on. There's just like so many of these examples of already existing systems that we're trying to change that are not benefiting at all from this massive artificial intelligence hammer that we're trying to.
That we're just hammering down.
Dude, come on, man! Like predictive policing, word.
Man, I like how we saw all the same examples, bro.
No, like seriously, like who like came up with predictive police?
Yeah.
It's probably it's definitely, this is the thing, right? Which is interesting about
some startup guy from Stanford dropout. He's like, I know what will solve the problem: solving crime. And then he's all like,
first of all, like that's the thing, right? Like the people that are typically, I'm gonna make a generalization, which is kind of terrible, but I feel like let me rephrase it. I feel like you wouldn't be quick to make a call to use AI to apply it to solve a problem where there's a history of oppression, right? Where
that's exactly.
And it comes back to the thing which we're talking about diversity of thought.
Yeah. Exactly. It's diversity of thought and it's limited observation, right? It's, I know when that student was asking me questions at SDSU, this guy, the only thoughts that he's been exposed to is Fox News.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's the only, he's always going to perceive it as an attack because that's the only way he's seen it. He's only seen it weaponized, right? And I can't come at it the same way that like you could come at different things, right? You have to go at it in a way that's like just helping him challenge his own thought. So I did want to get to some really hot takes for you, Tatenda. So one thing is that I was thinking about is, it's hard to distinguish data that is inherently unbiased, and it's hard to solve human problems. But I was thinking about how essentially this allows us to digitalize and operationalize bias, right? And then therefore it could point out to us the things that are biased, the many things that are biased, and then use that as a way of solving problems. And I was wondering if you think that is a way of basically debiasing. Does that make sense? So basically I'll give you an example, right? I know this is like super general terms and super like almost tautological sounding, right? But like the Amazon application, likelihood or success rate spat out basically that women are less likely to be employed by like, I think it goes 30% or something that I was reading, or 40%, something ridiculous. But now, do you think it's worthwhile for Amazon to take that tool and say, hey, look, this tool is telling us this. We should use this tool as a check every year, every 2 years, every month, right? And the less and less unlikely that the woman is to be hired, then we know that we're actually unbiasing our system, our hiring process. Or do you think that only exacerbates the problem? You get what I'm saying? Right? We built a good tool measuring the wrong thing, but can we use the wrong thing to correct what we need to correct?
If we're smart about it, then maybe. And what I mean by that is the people that are going to take these results need to basically think about how they're going to interpret the results and formulate a plan which might not necessarily be algorithmically based or computer, which might not necessarily involve artificial intelligence, but it might be something that could be used as a key learning point. Right. So I think that there is a chance that we can learn from the failures of these algorithms. But the way that we do it, I think, involves a lot more work with human beings.
Right. Yeah. No, that's what I was saying, the process flow, right? Like the first step is the team.
Which is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I feel like do you think, all right, here's one like off the top, like, do you think it's easier to unbias an artificial intelligence or an algorithm compared to unbiasing a human being? Which do you think is easier to unbias?
I had a similar question for you, and like, honestly, it's the questions framework itself is fucking weird, right? Which is, do you think it's easier to unbias, right? Like, the thing is about like an algorithm and data sets, you could point to what the wrong corollary was or what the wrong outcomes were, right? But with a person, it's really hard to point at like, oh, because you're biased, you missed this opportunity.
I think it's actually a trick question.
It is. No, for sure it is.
I don't. I think it's like incredibly hard to do both because humans are involved.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Because first of all, it's like, how do you even know that you're pointing out the right thing as bias?
Right.
Or how do you know that you're not missing out something else that could be biased within a specific outcome?
Yeah. So you know what is really interesting to me is like, really bias can even be found in the problem statement.
True.
Right? We said like, hey, this is the problem and we need to have a solution for this. That in of itself, saying it's the problem. Like even when like just to go back to something that we said was like, who thought it would be a good idea to solve crime via policing, right?
Right.
And it's really, that person said the problem is, the problem is crime and the solution is more policing. And we need to use the resources more efficiently, right? So the statement itself is actually a reflection of who's talking.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like
maybe we should maybe this is the thing though. I think I got two thoughts. The first thought is maybe we should run a survey of all the problems that AI is claiming it's solving and then check them for bias.
Yeah, dude, honestly.
Right?
Actually, you know what else? Like, it's just so easy to game, too. I don't know if you've seen on these resume things, like, people just stuff them with keywords.
Right.
I heard they, like, so, like, one of the things I heard was, like, there's people that, they basically write, like, 20 or 100 keywords and put the text in white and make it the size, like, 0.0 whatever. And just put it on the resume, and then when the automatic reader goes through, it reads all the keywords. Right? And scores it super high. And then the person just reads it, and they're just like, they might think it's trash, but it's just that they gamed it. So it's one thing I did have. Go ahead.
You can finish your train of thought.
One thing was going to be a different train of thought to Tony. You ready for this or what?
Dang. Now I just forgot what I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. Okay. So what I was going to say was that, can you, man, this is getting so meta yet again. But you could build a system, right, that stuffs your resume with keywords based on the outcome that it gets from recruitment.
Yeah.
So you can basically like figure out what keywords work best.
Yeah. And if it was like continually relearning, right? Then like eventually you could essentially shove everyone out of the resume system as being not good enough. Because if you could just auto feed the resumes enough.
Exactly.
This is like this is something I said like at work, they're like, oh, feedback loop this, feedback loop that. And I was like, well, in order for you to have a feedback loop, you have to have a forward process. Like,
right.
And if you just like, it's in chemical engineering, right? When you have a system that's feeding back a stream and basically it's just feeding more and more fluid through that same pipe without regulating itself, it amplifies the volume that pipe is going to see and then it just bursts, right?
Right.
And it's just kind of cool to think about how you could do that algorithmically.
Right. Right.
Yeah, man. So I did have a question for you, which is, okay, humans are biased, algorithms are biased, right?
Damn.
But which is worse? Like, what is worse? Are humans more biased? Are humans less biased? Are algorithms less biased? You know, what is progress here?
Humans are definitely worse.
You think? Why, you gotta give me more than that, man. Like, you can't just say definitely.
Come on, man. You see, the problem with humans is that I don't think that our thought processes can be, I guess, like bounded in a way. Like, you can't really,
really, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't write down the Mark algorithm on a piece of paper.
Oh, you could do it. I'm a simple man, dude. I'm a simple man.
Stop it. You know what I mean?
I feel it.
But, you know, the resume screener is like, you know, 5,000 lines of code and, you know, a data set that goes with it. And then, you know, we can just like delete the data set, delete the algorithm and start again. But you know what I mean? But like with
you think humans are worse because we have imagination? Okay, got it.
Yeah, pretty much humans are worse because we have imagination and we basically like don't stop learning, right? So we can unlearn some things and learn some new biases along the way, etc., etc. So that's my take. I could be wrong. Like, machines could be worse, you know, but that's just what I think. I think we're terrible.
Positive note.
Yeah. Man. I mean, think about it, right? It goes back to what we just talked about, where, you know, there's a class of people in the world that are so privileged, you know, that they decide to solve problems which just reinforce systematic oppressions.
You know, honestly, man, okay, you're right. You're apt to point it out, right? But if you think about it okay, not to be like cliche here, right? But like, if you think about it in terms of like feedback loops, right? Are we stopping a feedback by now digitizing it? Or is digitizing it just the same as us? Or is it worse than us? Like, so these systems of oppression, if you think about like, you know, in terms of history, I actually really like I love like like all the shit you say, Tatenda, right? But like when you say systems of oppression, I think you really hit it, right? You know, you go to any other country and there's still systems of oppression, right? Like, there's Uyghur people in China. There's just so many examples of minorities, right? Minority is a contextual thing, right? And humans have a natural tendency to be tribal. You know, we have that ingrained in our psychology, right? This is my friend, right? I'm gonna stick with you. You know, I don't care who messes with you. I'm gonna knock that fool, right? Like, That's this inherent tribalism, and also like really the start of our biases, where it's like it's so strong such that you know that your bud could be wrong, and you'll just get an all-out brawl
right
in the bar. You know what I'm saying? Just because he's your bud. Right? Just for the sake of quote unquote survival, even though you're putting yourself in jeopardy, right? Like,
right.
So I don't know, man. Like, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and I don't really know. I don't know if we're looking in the mirror or we're looking at a new beast.
I think it's the same beast, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I think it's the same beast in the sense that it's the same beast, but so the beast is both dumber. Even it's so ironic, right? It's like we're talking about artificial intelligence, then I'm calling artificial intelligence.
Well, yeah, well, most of it's like regression. Like, let's be honest here.
Right. No. It's just from a perception, you know, how we perceive artificial intelligence to be, right? Like we think of, you know, at least like that's, you know, when it first came out, like that's what I thought. I was like, man, this is gonna change the world. Of which it is.
You're like, oh wow,
and I thought it
so cool. because you're biased to tend to.
So I thought it was going to be smarter than just, I just learned to discriminate people based on where they live, and I'm going to continue doing it. It does it so well. Like, that's how dumb, the systems become. You know what I mean? Like, they do it so well. They do it blindly even. So in a sense, right, like, what makes that bias worse is that it can be carried out more efficiently, and it can be, I guess it can spread faster to more places than we could do it ourselves. Maybe that's the way to think about it, right? Because if you think about a piece of software, right, it's just a click and you've downloaded this thing onto your phone. I guess one could argue that ideas could spread just as fast, but this is how systems are spreading, right? Like, you're actually using systems to spread ideas, but then also at the same time, once you have a system that has some sort of encoded bias, it's just a piece of software. You can download it from anywhere in the world, really, and it can carry out its harms that way. So that's the part where I think the distinction is between the bias that's within us and the bias that we transfer into the algorithms or into artificial intelligence.
I think like you hit on a lot of really fucking neat things, and like one of the things I was thinking about is like ideas spreading, right? And we were talking last time about doom scrolling, and essentially, if I'm a person who's been oppressed, right, that algorithm that's designed to target me is going to send me more oppressed information.
Absolutely. Like,
so it, you know what I'm saying? So in a way, it's already algorithmic bias, but it's literally just putting me in my own echo chamber. I was like, oh man, like we're in too deep.
Have you heard of the phrase weapons of math destruction?
No. That's great.
I know.
That's fucking crazy.
That's pretty much like what these, I guess, like, just going back to the doom scrolling topic, but doom scrolling, weaponizing algorithms, and sort of like think about the discussion which we just had, which is Amazon could decide to use that negative result for good, right? But there could be actors out there that decide to use that negative result for bad, right? Which is using that terrible result to further oppress certain demographics. Right. So in that specific instance, you're now like you go from building a system which is perpetuating, biases and oppression, and then you're weaponizing it. So that's where kind of like the thought of, or the idea of weapons of math destruction comes into the picture, right?
Yeah, honestly, so like I think it's really fuck, man. Like I was just thinking like what is the moral responsibility of Amazon here, right? Like,
damn, so man, like
there's multiple takes, right? Which is like, we're just gonna shit on Amazon. Jeff Bezos is gonna call us like tomorrow, I'll pay you $1 million.
You gotta take this episode down.
You take this
episode down. Hey, listen, yeah, unfortunately.
Hey, Jeff Bezos, you're listening? Mackenzie's way better than you, bro. That's a hot take. Yeah. Hey, no, but okay.
Okay.
So Amazon develops this algorithm. Let's like think about like engineering, real
big tech develops this algorithm.
Yeah, right? So they build this algorithm. They see the output of this algorithm, right? They say, hey, this is wrong. So I had to give them some moral points for there.
Yes.
Somebody in that room, looked at at least a couple $100,000 project, and I was like, yo, we done fucked up, guys. We need to scratch this, right? But they didn't alert people. They buried it. So they had one person in that room that's right, but then they were like, yo, we gotta, we can't publicize this. I think this was like leaked documentation that this came out, right? That we found out about this algorithm.
Wired, man.
Wired.
Yeah, Wired.com. So they get the leaks, and we read them.
So it's like, what is their responsibility? Is there a responsibility to be like, hey, look, these systems exist? Essentially, really, what you did is you verified oppression. You verified, well, I mean, really, in very concrete terms, you verified bias in your system.
Are you asking?
You get what I'm saying?
Are you asking if the companies have a responsibility to call out bias in the systems that they're developing?
To announce, I think they do have some social responsibility to say, hey, look, we found this. This is information for the human race, right? This is essentially finding global warming. You know, being the first to find global warming. It's like, hey, look, there is a problem. We verified it. You know what I'm saying? Like, think of how many people would benefit if this company said, they don't have to do anything, and they don't have to do, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying a company should lose its profitability. I'm not saying a company owes it to society to spend its money on people. But it is not hard to pick up the news and be like, yo, we found that there is an issue. We found it in our own company. We don't have the solution right now. We are not going to develop the solution. It's beyond us. You know, we think it's a legacy of all these other systems. But I do think that there is some responsibility to communicate, hey, there is something that is broken here, right? Is that just me, or am I just like, am I way out there? Am I way too hippie right now? I am? You're just cracking up. You're like, this guy's stupid.
It's just you, dude. It's just you. Like, to be honest, I agree that companies definitely should take on more responsibility. But do I think that they will? No.
It's not, okay. I'm separating out, do I think they will versus what are they actually morally responsible? What is morally wrong?
The problem is that companies aren't people, so companies don't have morals. You know.
Damn. I don't know, man, because like, you know, they get taxed like people. You know what I'm saying? They get hold liability like people.
Yeah, but
you know what I'm saying? Like,
but the thing though is that
you're on a dangerous path by saying that, man.
Nah, I mean,
you know
so hear me out. I think that the social responsibility of companies is definitely admirable, but I also see sometimes the line that they draw in the sand as far as like how much social responsibility they're willing to espouse in their behaviors. You know, right, like, and it just comes back to the bottom line. Like that's really like, you know, where I was trying to go with the discussion on what the incentives are, right? If you're not incentivizing social responsibility enough, and if it's not in the interest of, you know, the investors or whoever it is that's funding this company, you know, like they're not gonna say anything. And like, but I still do think that, you know, it will go a long way if one, they would let the people that are working on these problems that discover issues within the algorithms, if they let them basically speak about their results first and foremost, right? So say, hey, we tried to solve this problem, it didn't work out because we found biases, and then that could inform other companies that might be doing similar research, right? And I think that would be beneficial to the field in general, right? Because at the end of the day, like, you know, like you're basically leveraging resources of really big companies of your Apples, your Facebooks, and things of that nature that can do research at a faster pace to help us figure out problems within the space and help us find solutions within the space. So that's where I think that that social responsibility would help. And in addition to just, you know, like I said, right, like in addition to just, you know, having that responsibility to talk about the issues that they find within the algorithms or within these systems, there has to also be an incentives and protections in place to allow people to actually talk about those problems without sort of like any risk to, you know, losing their job or anything of that nature. Because really, like the way that some of these things are coming out, like we discussed, it's like it's a whistleblower, or, you know, somebody that, you know, it's a whistleblower, somebody that got fired, or they eventually left the company, et cetera, et cetera. So that in itself is is a problem that that I hope will be addressed. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I think like the status quo is obviously subpar. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and largely, companies. I mean, my hippie is just gonna show through right here. Right. Like, companies largely are virtue signaling when they're saying that they give a shit about social good. Right. Like, it's so self-evident, like, hey, we donated this money for this reason because we want you to be our customer.
Right.
Right? But if you think about it, on the flip side is like, okay, maybe not what is their moral responsibility. Maybe they have no moral obligation because they themselves are not a person, or that entity in itself is not a person. Even if we totally nullified and voided the idea that the entity is indicative of a collection of people, right? Then it becomes okay, just let's be the most profits, right? And the most profits inherently, like economically, systems tend towards monopolies. That's like a repeated and true fact. But like, let's even nullify that. Let's just say most profits in a non-monopolistic manner, right? In a competitive, equally competitive market, truly something that would really work for laissez-faire, like in terms of just full market knowledge by the part of the consumer, et cetera, and just people are just going at it, right? If Amazon would still have a responsibility to their shareholders to communicate that, because what Amazon would do is they would alert companies to do it. Some company would find the solution to the problem, and Amazon would benefit from the solution to the problem via their hiring processes and whatever solution. They either buy the software licensing, they recognize another company did A, B, C, D, adjusted their policies that way. And then their products would benefit from the thought diversity that was brought on by that solution.
Right.
Right? If products are, if it's hard to reach a customer segment because you lack empathy and thought diversity helps you get towards that empathy, then it's almost a responsibility to its shareholder to perform those operations, right? To be adamant and to be loud and to say, hey, this is what we discovered. This is what our research pointed out. We need a solution to this problem, right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. But I think the I'm trying to put on my big tech hat.
Yeah.
I think the
billionaire boy hat, huh? Yo, Bezos.
Hey, my billionaire boys club hat or T-shirt. I think it's really hard for them to see or to make that connection.
Do you like?
You know what? We should model this.
Man. I get what? No, we should use AI to model this.
We should use AI to model this, right?
I think there's that in and of itself is a
think about it, right? Like I feel like
right.
Here's the thing, like the thing about the current situation that we're in is that maybe it's just that we don't have enough data, right, to show people, or at least like to convince big tech that, hey, thought diversity will lead to more profits, right? That's really like what they want to see. Like they just want that PowerPoint which correlates thought diversity, or they want it to be more more evidence. Pretty much, they want more evidence.
That data is actually readily available. That thought diversity leads to better products, because
not better products.
There's a whole
better
study.
Profits.
No, but also that too. Also that.
That's.
And I'll show you. I'll tell you some of the data that does exist.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a whole study of people who get paid, Mundo Bank, right, who study organizational behavior.
Yeah.
And a lot of the main things of organizational behavior is around thought diversity. And it's not only, and it's how you, in a team meeting, how are you making sure everyone is heard? How are you brainstorming? How are you empowering your employee to do this, to do the work at hand, right? And a part of that is safe environment. Part of that is, showing that there's diversity. A part of that is servant leadership. Part of that is, basically communicating or meeting their needs, And there is time and time again, the whole purpose of organizational behavior is how do you push up better profits via workplace psychology? You know what I'm saying? And that's like that. So there is evidence, right? Mm-hmm. But it's more so that there's legacy structures and incumbents that are not. Change is always gradual, right? Rome is not built in a day.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think they know. I don't think. But it's not a priority, right?
True.
They know, but not priority. Like that's the thing, right? Is like how much do those dollars translate versus another action that they would take.
That
right? Like,
man, now you're talking, man. Now you're talking.
Right? It's like, okay, do I either switch to open workspaces or do I make a new metaverse product? Facebook is just, they go full send, dude, with the stupidest products. They're like, oh yeah, VR headsets that no one fucking likes to buy. Yeah. We'll fucking develop it. For sure. What is it? Portal? Facebook Portal? We'll fucking develop it.
We'll do it.
Man, dude, stupid, dude. Like,
this is interesting, right? Like, thought experiment. Do you think that we could build a system or systems that are basically ethical and unbiased and would basically remove the human factor in inefficiencies? I'm just, hey, listen.
Yeah.
Do you get where my question is coming from,
systems? Though? Yeah. Do we think that we could build systems that do that?
Right, because you're saying that
can build.
Right, so you're saying that the problem is, you're dealing with people and change is gradual, and like it's hard to change their minds, etc. But if we can build systems that allow us to make decisions more efficiently and rapidly iterate within the business space, would you want a system like that? Yes or no?
Yes, I would want a system like that, right? B, which is can we? Yes, right? But C, which I think is the most interesting part of it, is that answer, that solution, A, it probably has limited use cases.
Yeah, true.
Right?
It can't be general.
Still on C, right? C1 is limited use cases. C2 is, I bet you anything, that answer is so contrary to what we believe that whatever that output is, somebody would be like, well, this is all fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be so just purely toxic to how we view the world today that our own biases would again surface and we would immediately reject that optimal answer, right? So I could think of some examples off the top of my head, which is actually extremely pertinent to previous conversations that we had. So resumes, right? Resumes to task at hand. Resumes are shit for saying what that person will do, right?
Yeah.
But let's say, so what's the solution, right? So it's the aptitude, the adaptability to perform that task and get it done, right? So inherently, let's say that you could build something that measured your adaptability, measured how intelligent you were. And I hate the word intelligence. That's a whole nother thing for another podcast, maybe next time. But let's say that system does exist. I bet you anything that system would point out people that are so contrary to who you think are intelligent in a normal job sense that you would be like, fuck that guy. That guy doesn't deserve $200,000. That guy might not have a high school degree. That guy might not have any previous experience. That guy might not even seem physically able, right? There are so many things about that person that could be potentially sent out if we had a true measurement that would upset us, right? And this is my own biases surfacing even when I'm thinking about it, right? I get mad when somebody has my job title and didn't work for it.
So this is,
you get what I'm saying? Like, I worked hard, like I worked hard. I feel like I deserve this the most.
So I guess this takes us back. I probably am asking the same question that you asked before, which is, can we use these crappy and, I guess like these unexpected and sometimes biased and terrible results to actually learn something about ourselves?
Right. Yeah. So again, I think that points to us really looking in the mirror, right? That we really are building systems that are like ourselves, and it makes us have a reflection. And I think we could. I think progress is slow, but at the same time, I don't think we ever confirmed on such a large scale that shit is fucked up.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's the first step. Like, just accept it, man. Like,
Yeah. There's value to that.
Yeah.
There's value to not being blissful, right?
Absolutely.
Like, there's value to knowing that there's global warming.
Absolutely,
right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's scary, but hey, now you could operationalize. Now you could act. Now you can measure. Now you can adjust, adapt.
Right.
Like,
one of the aspects of doing some research on this topic was, finding out about organizations like this Algorithmic Justice League. And the one that I just talked about.
That's a badass name, dude. I'm sorry, man, but that's like,
come on. How do you even beat that, man? And get this, like, the founder is she's a research computer scientist that's also a poet.
Dude.
And like the man, I gotta just like read the admission to you. Like, where's their website?
Yo, but poetry's easy. I'm even published poet, bro.
Are you a published poet?
Yeah, I am.
Damn,
but I'm not a research computer scientist, so I have like half the equation.
All right. So check this out. The Algorithmic Justice League is an organization that combines art and research to illuminate the social implications and harms of artificial intelligence. Like, that's just...
Damn. That was a poetic mission statement. Illuminate, man. Dude. He's just like, yo, let me shed some light.
I know. So basically, what organizations like AJL, like, they're literally like, heroes. You know what I mean? Like,
they're like the Justice League.
They're like the Justice League, but for algorithmic bias, right? Like, I feel like there needs to be more support for, organizations like AJL and DARE, which I just talked about a few minutes ago, where we need to support the work that's being done to actually address algorithmic biases outside of corporate and defense structures, right? Because without that, I feel like there's just like really no incentive for big tech to address some of these problems in some of these cases, or even publish those results, right? But the learning is actually coming from, one, doing the research, two, pointing out that there's a problem, or that we can actually solve this problem using this artificial intelligence or this algorithmic technique, backing away and finding alternative solutions, which is something that we talked about, instead of going with the build the hammer and find the nail. So I feel like those kind of organizations could help us get to some sort of state where there is equity and less bias within these algorithms and these artificial intelligence based systems. So that's this is something that I thought was interesting. But the messed up thing is that most of the charitable organizations that would fund such a project are like getting endowments from tech billionaires.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
so they could ignore them. So they could that's virtue signaling. That is the definition of virtue signaling. So they could go write a paper out in the boonies and then just get rejected. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got the best engineers there, bro. Like, they're sitting in your seats. You could turn a profit for you. Like, somebody's gonna come around, make it operationalized and profitable, and license it. And that company will either get bought out or they'll just get a nice paycheck. So every month, buy a license.
Man.
Tatenda, I just want to thank you very much, man. You're just so fucking cool, man. Honestly, I may be biased, but this is pretty cool fucking tech.
This is some cool fucking tech, man. Thank you for your time, Mark. I think, as we pointed out, right, like artificial intelligence has the potential to be a very powerful tool when used to solve the right problems, right?
And not policing.
Not policing, please. Definitely, not predictive policing. And I think one of the things, which we talked a lot about today, which I think is really important, is just like that emphasis of more diversity at all stages in the pipeline. You know what I mean?
I agree. I couldn't agree more.